Hey, welcome to the first episode of Action Insights. This is where we get amazing people who help you get insights so you can take action on your ecom and get a bigger piece of the ecom pie. Today, I have someone who is usually in the shadows. He was saying this is one of his first official interviews as far as Amazon is concerned. He is the founder of the Bedrock agency, Jeffrey Anderson, and he is going to be helping us out with developing and systemizing, specifically going over how to create and manage an SOP. We were talking before this and I was telling him my brain works in connections. And so I have admittedly a difficult time. I think anyone can learn anything, but I have a difficult time on zoning in on the one thing and kind of defining it and making it its own separate thing. And Jeff is really good at that. His background, he's run 100-person teams and had to rely on SOPs to run those teams. I'm super excited to have you on and welcome.
Thanks for having me, Elizabeth.
Yeah, I'm super looking forward to this. So give a quick background on yourself, your agency, and what it is that you do.
So I've been selling online since the early eBay days, since the early 2000s. Basically started to help pay off the student loan debt. And in 2019, I opened an Amazon agency that mainly specializes in brick and mortar stores. So we do, Barbara Cochran at Shark Tank is our biggest client. We do multiple brands for her. We do a couple private labels, but not many. So we kind of stick with the brick and mortar clients.
Yeah, and you definitely specialize on taking brands who, again, brick and mortar, already have some sales and then helping them bring them to the Amazon platform, which there's a whole lot of moving pieces involved in that. And I'm sure SOPs come in handy in that line of work.
Especially in the onboarding process when
some
of these small mom and pops don't understand what the internet is.
Oh, that's a whole nother ballgame. That's not even Amazon problems.
Yeah.
So first off, most people probably know, but let's just quickly define, what is an SOP?
An SOP, they're one of the most powerful tools you can have when it comes to getting other people to help you accomplish a certain goal. They are a series of steps that allow you or anyone else doing a task to achieve a predictable outcome. That would be like the definition if you were in the Webster Dictionary.
Very cool. Yeah, that's really good, concise. So it's basically you saying, hey, I want this done like this. Do it this way.
I don't quite believe in that approach. That would be the definition of one.
Cool. I think mind clarifying when you say I don't believe in that approach, you mean a very defined, non-changing?
Yeah, so my definition of an SOP would be feel guilty until you spend weeks on a giant folder of long rambling Loom videos that no one watches.
That might be what I do.
So that's my take on the traditional SOP. And that's why I think a lot of people get hung up on that point. They try to take off way too much and things that they think should be an SOP really don't need to be.
That's a really good point. So my next question would be where would you even start? If you're saying not everything needs to be an SOP, how do you go about figuring that out?
Instead of a traditional organizational chart, I read this book called Scaling Up, and I really recommend it. And it's about being a smaller entrepreneur, being a solo entrepreneur, just a new expanding team. But instead of looking at traditional corporate org chart where you have your marketing department, you have your sales department, you have your logistics department, look at things instead of siloed vertically, look at it more horizontally, how the customer travels through your business.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So
it would help you pinpoint a specific map.
Yeah, so everybody has a purpose in their business that's the very high level, to make money. That's at the very, very top of your org chart is I want to make a sustainable profit. And so then below that could be how are you going to do that? So you want to use a verb pair and in job and say, I want to make a profit. Below that would be deliver exceptional customer service. And then below that, how are you going to do that? Make yourself accessible to your clients. So you're going to set up a Calendly. So that set up a Calendly would be a project. You don't need an SOP on how to set that up because you'll do it once. But the recurring checking of the Calendly, that's where the SOP would come in.
Cool. I like it. Yeah, it's almost like in doing an SOP, obviously you need a goal to accomplish, but it almost starts with the end in mind, but not just the end of the SOP. Done, smiley face, you completed the SOP. It's no, goal is ultimate goal, and then everything else falls in line underneath it.
Yeah, you need to first figure out, do you need it? Is it a repetitive task at or near the exchange of value? And the value could be monetary or informational. Once, if it's a yes to that, and then the next step would be confirm your start and stop. Like, where are you starting and where are you stopping? And then once you do that, then fill in some like subheadings, I call them. I guess they would call them, but different like high level stepping stones. And then use it a couple times and fill in the rest. Or have the person responsible for using it fill in the rest. Because you may write an SOP, be like, yeah, open this app, do this, and then open this app and do that. But the person actually doing the work could have the second app open already because they just finished another task.
So the person closest to the project, or in this case, like the step-by-step, should be the one to fill out the nitty-gritty of it. Cool. So I have a question when you said define a start and stop, because I think that's really important. But I know for me, like we were saying, my brain connects things, which has served me well. But when it comes to defining a start and stop, sometimes I find that difficult and I get stuck in like this all or nothing loop. How do you go about like defining start and stop? Like do you have any like benchmarks or ways you think of it?
Well, a lot of times it's like at that point that I was talking about the exchange of value. Is there an information exchange, or are you still carrying it on? Or is there a value exchange at that point? That's going to fall into your own style. Like you could probably look at like 7 different SOPs and 5 of them must stop here and 2 of them keep going and one of them, there could be all different stopping points.
Would you define it as like a task you do, like for instance, an SOP, you probably wouldn't want it to be a task that would span like a couple days or something, I'm assuming. Is it like a set task that happens within a single setting? Would that be correct?
Yeah, I would say like, there's a lot of studies that come out and say people work best in 15-minute blocks. It's that whole sprint theory. They sprint for 15 minutes. I think it's 15 minutes. I'd have to look that up. Like somebody's going to watch this and be like, no, this theory is 32 minutes. But, like if you keep it like that 15-minute task, people can almost like sprint through it. I mean, you do have tasks that are marathons, but I would kind of keep them shorter.
That makes sense. Is there a specific way that you like to approach documentation? Is it wherever it lives?
So we use Miro to map things out, which is a free app, and it makes really good decision trees. And then we also use ClickUp. Like, so those are the 2 programs we use. And I like to put everything in ClickUp, like to be the central hub.
Got it. So you feel like the SOP should live where the work happened?
Yeah, on the task card, the link to it. Or in the description.
Yeah. I think that's what we found for our team is that the less steps that have to happen to find the printout of what they want, because we've tried things where it's like, oh, SOPs live over here, but if they're divorced from like where we're actually doing the work, we find there's less references of the SOP.
We actually have a decision tree of where to put the SOP in our company.
Oh, so you mapped pretty much everything.
Yeah. I was like, oh, that's a perfect question right there. I got a decision tree for that.
So for those of you who might just be listening to this, Jeff's actually going to walk us through your decision tree and how you figure out where the SOP lives.
So
go ahead.
If your team is strongly recommended to store them, to say yes over here, and then is it important for you to store all your SOPs directly within ClickUp? Some people use Guru. It's a great program. I can't say anything bad about it, but I prefer ClickUp. So then let's go down to no. I don't typically do this. So no, I'd rather this content not be in ClickUp. Do you want to be able to report on the status and quality of the SOP? Are you using the ClickUp free plan? No. Use a website custom field link to store the SOP elsewhere. So basically, you're going to use the website custom field to link an SOP stored elsewhere inside of ClickUp. So that's the decision.
So your decision tree also would factor in how frequently you would update things, it seems.
Or you can come down here. Yes, I'd rather it all be in ClickUp. Is it important for you to be able to frequently and automatically back up information out of ClickUp? Yes, backups are essential. But do you want to be able to report on the status and quality? It basically just walks you down to tell you, should it be duplicate a master copy, a ClickUp template, mention in a doc or link, mention in a task, mention in a doc of an SOP, ClickUp task of an SOP, or use a website. Like those are your 7 options you could do.
Yeah, so it sounds like there are a lot of options when it
Mm-hmm.
comes to documentation. Do you recommend for those getting started, would you recommend just say, hey, open a Word doc and start? Or do you think it makes sense for them to try and put it in whatever their task management software is?
The ClickUp free plan is pretty powerful. I would recommend anybody to at least give that a try with the ClickUp Docs and try to do it in there and learn it as you go. But Google Docs will work just as well, but Google folders can get messy quick. We all know that.
Yeah, I think we all have a couple folders stored like old or archived somewhere with probably about 20 different folders that we may or may not ever open again.
Yeah. Like that one drawer in the kitchen. This is all done in Miro. We use these decision trees for everything. If I scroll up, what type of reoccurrence should you use in the task? We have a decision tree for. Should I use a subtask, assigned comment, a checklist, or a description? So how should it even be placed inside of a task in ClickUp? A subtask, assigned comment, checklist, or description.
Cool. So do you find that visually mapping it out is very helpful for people who are just trying to figure out what the structure needs to look like?
I think so. Especially everybody's business is different. Everybody's processes are different. But being able to have a yes, no, it does it go here, does it go there, like really simplifies a lot of things. And it keeps it standardized.
How important do you think is standardization?
I think that's very important when you get multiple people working together. Because it's like the one person that likes to hide a file in some weird folder that you can never find again.
Yeah.
It's like, where'd that bulk file go? Oh, it's here.
Yeah. I know in our agency, just simple things like naming, keeping that uniform allows the entire team insights or our internal folder structure for clients. Go into any account and know where to find the latest bulk file or the latest search term report. Those kind of things, super helpful and honestly save time.
Yeah, and when you're dealing with like multiple people, it's real easy if somebody has to leave for a personal reason or gets let go. It's really easy to take their tasks and put them on somebody else or pick them up yourself because you know exactly what they're doing because of the standardization.
If you were going to standardize something, what would be the main thing? Because I'm sure things morph and change, but what would be like the main things you would think are the most helpful to keep consistent?
Really the repeating tasks. And I think that's where we were talking about in the beginning, like that there's a big difference between a project and a repeating task. Like sometimes projects are just real, you're going to do it once, you might do it twice. Like that doesn't need to be standardized.
So we went all over a lot of like how to think about SOPs, how to dig down, standardization, where they should live, how you should start. Do you think you could help us wrap our brains around, you were saying that simple high mapping. So if I'm going to sit down, like you were saying, Calendly, what would that look like? What would maybe trigger me to start the task? How would I figure out my mapping of it? How would I start like putting that into an SOP I could then pass off to a team member?
So if you come down like the decision tree and we say exceptional client service, and then below that would be, let's say, onboarding clients, the Calendly link. So what is the process for onboarding a client? They would go in, they'd enter their email, they'd pick their time, and then what happens on your end? Do you double check that you don't have another engagement going on then? Is it a day that you're taking off? Is it a day that you're double booked? So like that process of the calendar invite comes in to making sure you're all clear would be a very important process.
Yeah, you wouldn't want to forget your new client sitting in the meeting room. That would not be a good scenario.
No, not a good first impression. And then after that, it's do you have to send them any paperwork for the meeting? So once it's set in stone, you're gonna have the meeting on Friday at 2:00. Is there anything that you need before or that they need before? Do you want access to their account? Do you want them to fill out these 4 or 5 forms? And then where does it all live?
Cool.
Like where's the grave site for all this stuff? So there would be like 3
Cool.
processes right there.
So that's like your overview of here you were talking about before, like the pathway, thinking of it almost from a client perspective, I guess. So it's here's the pathway the client takes. What are their touch points with me? What do I need to happen on the back end for this to go smoothly? And then each of those individual pieces, you then would sit down and write out the SOP for that.
Yeah, and that's where we would decide, is it like one ClickUp task, or is it a task with a checklist, or is it a task with subtasks in it? And we'd go through that decision tree.
Cool. Do you have a specific way that you would define checklist or subtask?
A lot of times, like a checklist or the difference between a checklist and a subtask is due date. Is
That's a
the
good
due
point.
date of the subtask different than the checklist?
I like that. Yeah. Would you consider that like an SOP within an SOP, or is it its own
Yep.
entity?
It may not be like a full-blown SOP like we were talking about in the beginning where you have to click here and click there, but it could be just an SOP of the meeting's at Friday at 2. Please follow up if we haven't received everything at 4:30 on Thursday. That's a SOP. Like somebody's going to read that and say, oh, I got to follow up.
Okay, so that's what you were talking about. Task, and not necessarily task in ClickUp, just like a general task that needs to be done. So that would be, okay, this is the task, and then the SOP almost sits under and is the click here, click there of that task,
Yeah.
is what you're saying.
You can write it in the description of a task card, which works out really well.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense, especially when you can have like templates and duplicate them and do all kinds of fun stuff in ClickUp. When we're talking SOPs, just to give a quick recap, when you're defining the thing that has to be done, it's almost like defining, you were saying before, the stepstones along a pathway that take us to end goal. And you were saying end goal is we want to make profits, which means we need to retain clients, which means clients need to have a good experience. So what are the stepstones that take that client to the good experience? And then within the stepstones, that's where we do a click here, click there.
Yeah, I think a lot of people, they get this real type A OCD personality where I got to have these long, glorious SOPs with screenshots and videos. You don't need it. People aren't going to read it. Just get the high level points. Spend 5 to 10 minutes on one. And that's all
So
you
you're
really need to
saying
do.
done is better than perfect, and perfect is never done.
Yeah. That's coming from the guy that like has a decision tree to where to put the SOP, but yeah.
Well, if you're telling us it doesn't have to be that complicated, well, that makes me feel better.
Yeah, those Loom videos are really getting watched.
I know, we can look at the watch times. Well, yeah, I mean, I'm so stoked to have you on. This has been great. It's been really helpful for me to think, again, like pathways, stepstones, okay, that's how you define. It seems almost more of like an organic way to find the start stop. Because I think when we try and force the start stop, or me, that I think that's where my head gets lost.
A lot of people get lost in that part. And I think that's why a lot of people, they start doing them and they just get like, they stop.
I just hired somebody who was good at it and had her do it for me, if we're being honest. This has been phenomenal. I thank you so much for coming on. Thank you for being my guinea pig. I definitely want to you say a little bit more about your agency, where people can find you, and then you're working on something really awesome, which I'm so excited to be a part of. So if you want to share a little bit about that.
So you can go to our website to find us, thebedrockagency.com, and there's a contact us, which will go through our excellent customer service process that we just outlined. And yeah, so I'm starting a mentor group. Okay, we're going to flip the script. It's not going to be like a bunch of pre-recorded videos. It's going to be meeting twice a week. And when I'm doing it, it's basically going to be following me as I work along in an account. And then we're going to tackle across each meeting and like then just go over how to build it in the ClickUp system. So we're going to define a process and then go over what's your recurrence should be as a baseline. Everything's a baseline because every account's different. But what the recurrence should be, how you should build it in there. And I'm basically going to give you all of my SOPs.
Yeah, you were telling me about it. I'm like, oh, that sounds amazing. Because again, me defining start stops, defining the path, defining the stepstones, like you're basically just handing that to somebody and allowing them to not only, sometimes when you get handed something like that, you're like, great, okay, where does it live? You're saying not only am I handing it to you, I'm going to show you where it lives, how to build it, how to use it. And I'm super excited to be a part of that. As always, thank you so much for joining Action Insights. Jeff, it has been a pleasure. Again, the goal with these is to bring on an expert guest who knows a lot about something, in this case SOPs, how to make them, and then give you that information so you can take action and improve your business.